Randall Woodfield, the I-5 killer. In 1974, the Green Bay Packers took a chance on a tall, athletic wide receiver out of Portland State named Randall Woodfield, selecting him in the 17th round. On paper, he looked like a classic underdog story, a small school standout trying to make it big in the NFL. He showed flashes of potential during training camp, but Green Bay cut him before the regular season ever began. What no one realized at the time was that they had just sent home a man who would become one of America's most notorious serial killers. After football, Woodfield's life took a sinister turn. He began committing a string of robberies and sexual assaults up and down the West Coast. By the late 1970s, his violent behavior escalated to murder. Traveling along the Interstate 5 corridor, the major highway running from California through Oregon to Washington, Woodfield targeted victims in a spree that would eventually earn him the nickname the I-5 Killer. Authorities linked him to a staggering number of crimes, with investigators suspecting his involvement in as many as 44 murders. He was convicted of one in 1981 and given a life sentence, though many believe his true number of victims is far higher. Today, Woodfield remains behind bars in Oregon, serving multiple life terms. His story stands as one of the darkest intersections of sports and crime, proof that the NFL once drafted a man who would go on to become one of America's most prolific killers.
Chuck Hughes, the only on-field fatality. October 24th, 1971. The Detroit Lions were facing the Chicago Bears in a close, late-season matchup. With just over a minute left in the game, 28-year-old wide receiver Chuck Hughes lined up for what would unknowingly become the final play of his life. Moments later, he collapsed face-first onto the turf. At first, players thought he might be cramping or trying to draw a flag. Then they realized something was terribly wrong. Hughes was motionless. Both teams' medical staffs sprinted onto the field, including legendary Bears linebacker Dick Butkus, who waved frantically for help, a haunting image forever etched in NFL history. Medics worked on Hughes as 54,000 stunned fans fell silent. His teammates knelt around him, some praying, others frozen in disbelief. He was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital, where doctors pronounced him dead. The cause was a massive heart attack triggered by undiagnosed arteriosclerosis. One of his coronary arteries was 75% blocked. Incredibly, after Hughes was taken off the field, play resumed. The Lions and Bears finished the game as if nothing had happened, a decision unthinkable by modern standards. To this day, Chuck Hughes remains the only NFL player to die on the field during a game. The Lions retired his number 85 in his honor, and his death remains one of the most sobering reminders of how fragile life can be in professional sports.
The Jaguars Axe Incident, 2003. When Jack Del Rio became head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2003, he wanted to instill toughness and accountability into a struggling franchise. To symbolize that mindset, he brought a tree stump and a real axe into the locker room. The message was simple: keep chopping wood. Players were encouraged to take a swing at the stump, a daily reminder that success comes from persistence and effort. But that motivational prop soon turned into a bizarre and painful headline. During one of those team sessions, punter Chris Hansen swung the axe, missed the stump, and struck his own leg. The gash was deep enough to require surgery and ended his season immediately. The accident left teammates in disbelief. Losing a player to a locker room accident, especially a punter, felt like something out of a dark comedy. The axe and stump were quickly removed, and Del Rio reportedly joked about finding a new slogan. But the incident lived on as one of the strangest moments in team history.
Kevin Allen, crack habit and prison sentence.
In 1985, the Philadelphia Eagles used the 9th overall pick on offensive tackle Kevin Allen out of Indiana. He was a massive, physically gifted lineman expected to become a franchise cornerstone. But from the moment he stepped onto an NFL field, it was clear something wasn't clicking. Allen struggled badly in his rookie season, missing assignments, giving up sacks, and looking completely overwhelmed. Head coach Buddy Ryan, never one to sugarcoat his words, famously summed it up by saying Allen was a nice kid, but he can't play dead. What the public didn't know was that Allen's issues ran much deeper than football. Soon after his poor rookie campaign, Allen tested positive for cocaine, and was banned from the league. His fall from grace only accelerated from there. In 1987, Allen and a friend were charged with sexually assaulting a woman in a New Jersey hotel. Though he denied the allegations, he was convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He served nearly half of that sentence before being released, attempting a brief comeback in the World League of American Football, but his name had already become synonymous with wasted potential.
O.J. Murdoch, suicide at Titans camp. O.J. Murdoch's story is one of untapped potential and devastating tragedy. A gifted wide receiver out of Fort Hays State, Murdoch had bounced between colleges before finally putting up impressive numbers in his senior year. Despite going undrafted in 2011, he earned a contract with the Tennessee Titans, who saw flashes of promise in his speed and playmaking ability. Murdoch spent his rookie year on injured reserve, but was invited back to training camp the following summer. However, as camp began, Murdoch never reported. On July 30th, 2012, Tampa police found him in his car parked outside Middleton High School, his old high school, where he had taken his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was just 25 years old. The news sent shockwaves through the Titans organization and the football community. Murdoch's teammates had expected him to compete for a roster spot that year. No one had seen signs of the pain he was battling privately. His death served as a stark reminder that the pressures of professional sports can weigh heavily on young players, especially those fighting for a chance to prove themselves. Behind every highlight reel and roster move, there are human stories that often go untold. Murdoch's was one of them. Brian Pata, still unsolved murder. Brian Pata was on the verge of realizing his NFL dream. The 22-year-old University of Miami defensive lineman had declared for the draft in 2006 and was projected as a mid-round pick. At 6 feet 4 inches and nearly 280 pounds, he was known for his strength, intensity, and leadership, a local Miami standout who would become a key figure in the Hurricanes' defense. But on the night of November 7th, 2006, just hours after practice, tragedy struck. Pata was shot in the head outside his apartment complex in Kendall, Florida. The shooting happened at close range, and investigators quickly ruled it a homicide. Yet despite his high-profile status, the case went cold almost immediately. There were no witnesses willing to talk, no usable surveillance footage, and no arrests. For nearly 15 years, the murder of Brian Pata remained one of college football's great mysteries. Then, in 2021, a breakthrough came when police arrested Rashawn Jones, a former Miami teammate with whom Pata had a history of personal tension, including disputes over playing time and a shared romantic relationship. Investigators cited new witness statements and cell phone data as key evidence, but even with the arrest, the case still hasn't gone to trial. To this day, Pata's murder remains unresolved in the eyes of the law. For many who followed his career, it's a heartbreaking story. A player who had all the talent and determination to succeed, cut down just months before he could ever step onto an NFL field. Devon Bess, police standoff and public breakdown. Devon Bess built a reputation as one of the most dependable slot receivers in the NFL. Undrafted out of Hawaii in 2008, he clawed his way into the league with the Miami Dolphins, becoming a reliable target known for his crisp routes and steady hands. His story began as one of perseverance, a troubled teenager who had turned his life around to reach the highest level of football. But after leaving the league in 2013, everything changed. In January 2014, Bess made national headlines after a bizarre incident at a Florida airport. Witnesses described him as agitated and erratic. He removed his shirt, danced in the terminal, and shouted at law enforcement before being detained and taken for psychiatric evaluation. Just months later, Bess was arrested again, this time in Arizona, after barricading himself in his car during a tense police standoff. Officers were called after Bess posted disturbing and erratic photos on social media, including images of himself shirtless, pointing at police officers, and holding what appeared to be marijuana. When police arrived, he refused to exit the vehicle, locking himself inside for hours before finally surrendering without incident. The events shocked fans who remembered him as a disciplined, hard-working player. Bess disappeared from the public eye soon after, his NFL career officially over. His story highlighted an issue that often goes unseen: the mental and emotional struggles many athletes face once the lights of the league fade away. Johnny Jolly, codeine addiction and a fall from grace. Johnny Jolly was supposed to be one of the Green Bay Packers' defensive cornerstones. Drafted in the 6th round in 2006 out of Texas A&M, he quickly rose through the ranks to become a starter. At 6 feet 3 inches and over 320 pounds, Jolly was known for his raw power and disruptive presence along the defensive line. But behind the scenes, he was fighting a dangerous addiction. Jolly developed a dependency on codeine, often mixed with soda and candy into a drink known as purple drank, or lean. What began as casual use spiraled into criminal behavior. In 2008, he was arrested in Houston after police found more than 200 grams of codeine in his possession. While awaiting trial, he continued to play. But in 2010, the NFL suspended him indefinitely. Later that same year, he was arrested again, this time with over 600 grams of liquid codeine, and charged with possession with intent to distribute, a felony in Texas. He was convicted in 2011 and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Jolly served nearly 2 years before being released on parole, determined to rebuild his life. Incredibly, he made a brief comeback with the Packers in 2013, playing in 8 games and earning praise for his redemption effort. But a serious neck injury ended his career for good. His story remains one of the NFL's more complicated redemption arcs. A man who lost everything to addiction, fought to reclaim it, and came up short only because of fate. Tom McHale, painkiller addiction, overdose, and CTE. Tom McHale wasn't a superstar, but he was the kind of player every team needs. Tough, reliable, and selfless. Over 9 NFL seasons, mostly with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, McHale carved out a solid career as an offensive lineman known for his grit and intelligence. When he retired in 1995, he seemed ready to move on from football and start the next chapter of his life. But football left its mark. Years of collisions had taken a brutal toll on his body. McHale suffered from chronic pain that grew worse with time. To cope, he turned to prescription painkillers, first as a medical necessity, then as a daily crutch. Eventually, his use spiraled into addiction. He began doctor shopping and mixing painkillers with other substances, losing control as his life began to unravel. On May 25, 2008, McHale was found dead at a friend's home in Florida. The cause was an accidental overdose involving oxycodone, cocaine, and alcohol. He was just 45 years old. After his death, researchers at Boston University's CTE Center examined his brain and discovered severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the degenerative brain disease now widely associated with repeated head trauma. McHale's wife, Lisa, became a powerful advocate for player safety and head injury awareness, later joining the Concussion Legacy Foundation to help other families. His story became one of the early examples of how football's hidden costs could reach far beyond retirement. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous injuries aren't the ones you can see. Barry Bennett, murdered by his own son. For over a decade, Barry Bennett was a respected defensive lineman in the NFL, best known for his time with the New York Jets. A 4th-round pick out of Concordia College in 1978, he played in 132 games over 11 seasons, a quiet professional who did his job without drama. After retiring, Bennett returned home to small-town Minnesota, where he and his wife Carol lived a peaceful life focused on family and community. That peace was shattered in August 2019, when neighbors grew concerned after not seeing the Bennetts for several days. Deputies who arrived at their home in Long Prairie, Minnesota, found a horrifying scene. Both Barry and Carol had been shot to death. The suspect was immediately clear: their 22-year-old son, Dylan Bennett. Investigators soon learned that Barry had previously warned authorities about his son's violent thoughts. Months before the murders, he had told police that Dylan had spoken about wanting to kill his parents while undergoing mental health treatment. Despite that warning, Dillon was eventually released. After the murders, he fled in his parents' car, withdrew cash from their bank accounts, and crossed into Mexico, where he was captured days later. Dillon Bennett was extradited back to the U.S. and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. According to prosecutors, he shot both of his parents with a shotgun before leaving town. The case shocked the NFL community and left friends and former teammates stunned, not just by the brutality of the crime, but by the haunting foresight of Barry's warning. Tony Washington, drafted despite a controversial past. Tony Washington had all the traits NFL scouts look for: size, strength, quick feet, and discipline. As a standout offensive tackle at Abilene Christian University, he looked like a mid-round draft pick with long-term potential. But Washington carried a past that made him one of the most controversial prospects in modern draft history. At 16 years old, Washington was convicted in Texas for a consensual act with his 15-year-old sister, a case categorized under the state's laws as a serious offense requiring lifetime registration. The case was complex. It involved 2 minors and, by all accounts, no violence. But the label stuck with him forever. After serving his sentence and completing counseling, Washington worked to rebuild his life, returning to football and staying transparent about his past. When the 2010 NFL Draft arrived, teams knew everything. Washington didn't hide from his history, he faced it directly. Despite his talent, the stigma was too great. He went undrafted, though he eventually earned a tryout with the Indianapolis Colts and later joined the Calgary Stampeders in the CFL, where he managed to build a quiet, respectable career. Washington's case remains one of the most unusual in football history, a story about redemption, judgment, and the blurred lines between second chances and public perception. Jimmy Hitchcock, the NFL star tied to a drug ring. At first glance, Jimmy Hitchcock seemed like the kind of player destined for quiet success. A second-round pick by the New England Patriots in 1995, Hitchcock quickly became one of the league's most underrated defensive backs. He was athletic, disciplined, and had a knack for finding the football, recording multiple pick sixes and serving as a key part of the Vikings' high-powered late 90s defense. But after his NFL career ended, Hitchcock's life drifted in a very different direction. In 2011, federal investigators began tracking a large-scale drug and money laundering operation that stretched across Alabama and beyond. At the center of it was a man named Cornelius Johnson, who was running a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring. As the case unfolded, agents uncovered financial records and phone logs that tied Hitchcock to the scheme. According to court documents, Hitchcock was accused of using his connections and legitimate businesses to help launder drug profits. In 2013, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute cocaine and was sentenced to nearly 4 years in federal prison. For fans who remembered his playing days, it was a stunning downfall. The former NFL cornerback, who once intercepted legends like Brett Favre, was now sitting behind bars for helping move kilos of cocaine. When Hitchcock was released, he spoke about wanting to rebuild his life and use his story as a warning that fame and fortune can disappear fast when you start chasing the wrong crowd. Eugene Robinson, the night before the Super Bowl. Few players have ever embodied professionalism like Eugene Robinson. The veteran safety spent 16 years in the NFL, earning 3 Pro Bowl selections and a Super Bowl ring with the Green Bay Packers. But in January 1999, the night before Super Bowl 33, Robinson made a decision that forever altered his legacy. While in Miami with the Atlanta Falcons, just hours after receiving the Athletes in Action Good Guy Award for his character and community work, Robinson was arrested for soliciting a prostitute, who, as it turned out, was an undercover police officer. The news broke almost instantly, turning the Falcons' Super Bowl week into a media circus. Robinson played the next day, but was visibly off his game. The Falcons lost badly to John Elway's Broncos, and Robinson's arrest became one of the most infamous pre-Super Bowl scandals ever. Though he avoided jail time, the incident effectively ended his career as a respected team leader. In the years since, Robinson has been open about the incident, describing it as the lowest moment of his life. He went on to become a broadcaster and mentor, often using his experience to speak about accountability and faith. Still, the image of that night,
a respected veteran caught in a moment of weakness on football's biggest stage, remains a reminder of how fragile reputations can be. If you'd like to watch some of our previous content, click the link on screen.